Greetings and salutations, movie fans, Coco and Daltz fans from across this vast, vast planet of ours.
There are many of you we know, because we see the download numbers.
We know. We've sent each and every one of you a thank you. So this is Coco and Daltz. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Daltz.
And on this podcast, we like to talk about many things, many interesting things. Some things we like to talk about are not very interesting. But,
don't say that. What's wrong with you?
But this week, on this episode, we will talk about a very interesting topic. Because we were so successful in our podcast when we talked about the best movies of 1995 and their place in the 1996 Oscar race.
No, it was the 94 movies and the 95 Oscar race. Okay. Sorry, I messed that up.
So, because we had so much success, and I remembered it so clearly, why it was the way it was, we're going to go and do that again. So, the best movies from 1997 as honored at the 1998 Oscars.
What? I mean, this is the 20th anniversary. So
this is the 20th anniversary. This is why we're doing it, because we're all about celebrating anniversaries. What is 20 anyway? Is that China or is that... celluloid.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's what it is.
Let me look that up while you
Okay, well,
keep talking.
I tell people what we're doing here. So, the movies that we are going to talk about in terms of which ones we think were the best. So, the nominations for the Best Picture of 1997, which would have been honored in the 1998 Oscars. Am I annoying you with that point, or
no? I just feel like you're taking a very roundabout way of describing things.
It's because I'm trying to buy time because I can't find the list on the.
Okay, so the nominees for Best Picture in the '98 Oscars were Titanic, Good Will Hunting, As Good as It Gets, L.A. Confidential, and The Full Monty.
Yes, so you knew them, so I didn't need to go to the list apparently.
Okay.
So
that's because we've talked about it over the past couple of days, so I just remembered.
So the winner of the Best Picture of 1997 at the 1998 Oscars.
How many people have turned off by now because you keep saying that?
Do you think there's anybody left?
No, that's true.
Titanic won for Best Picture, as if nobody knew that.
Yeah.
And but do we really want Titanic to be the winner? That's what I want to know. So you talk.
I don't agree with that whatsoever. I think Titanic is vastly overrated. I agree with giving James Cameron Best Director. I know it's slightly controversial giving somebody Best Director and then not giving that same movie Best Picture, but I agree with giving him Best Director just in terms of like the scope of that project that he undertook and all the technical stuff that went along with it. And it really was kind of a feat. But the movie itself was, pretty boring. My ass fell asleep at the 2-hour mark and the boat hadn't even hit the iceberg yet. And the love story...
Did you go to a drive-in? You were on a donkey?
No, I was actually in at the end.
Oh, not that ass.
No, my actual bottom.
Oh.
And... to keep it PG-13 for the kids.
Yeah.
And so we don't have the E tag for explicit.
We don't want the E tag.
And the love story just wasn't compelling. I didn't buy it. I didn't buy Jack not being able to get on the door in the ocean at the end of it. Like, the song was awful.
Kate Winslet wasn't that big. She didn't need to take up the whole
Right. I know that James Cameron has come out since then and tried to explain like how two bodies would affect the buoyancy of the door, but nobody's buying that, Jimmy.
So here's the thing. When your life is on the line,
you're
probably going to try it.
Right, exactly. Like when the alleged love of your life, who you've known for 3 days, is in the frigid North Atlantic, maybe scoot your ass over.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. So. And there was some scenes that were cut out of that too. I think when she was eating grapes or something like that and he was sitting there unable to get on the door, freezing. You remember that part?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. And he was still fanning her with like the giant leaf, though, while she was eating the grapes.
And she had one of those things that you put in your gloves when you go skiing.
Oh, yeah, like the lump of coal or whatever.
Yeah, and she had one of those, and he was cold and had the frosty nose.
Like threw it at his head and was like, "Get back in the water."
Those were on the cutting room floor. Those scenes,
right? Totes. So,
well, and also that movie in those days, for people who were not alive in those days, because it was 20 years ago, that there was a lot of hype surrounding that movie going in because James Cameron had gone way over budget. I think it was $200 million or something like that at the time, which in 2018 dollars is a lot.
Well, not unless you're... I mean, if you're a Marvel movie, that's pretty standard, but, you know...
For a love story with a ship.
Right, exactly. So...
Not so much.
Yeah, the best thing about that movie is anybody who has ever watched The Young and the Restless will know what I'm talking about. Victor Newman played John Jacob Astor, and he popped up in the first, 5 minutes, and I was like, oh, that's Victor Newman! Because my grandma loved The Young and the Restless, and I've seen it a time or two. So that was the highlight of that movie for me. Was Victor Newman.
So I went to see Titanic on the day it opened, not because I was standing in line or anything like that, but it was just like, oh, let's what movie am I going to go see? Oh yeah, okay, Titanic. Let's go see that. So I was not caught up in all the hype in terms of it's the best love story anybody's ever seen, and Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet and special effects and Billy Zane and all that sort of stuff. I wasn't caught up. I went in there sort of, in those days, the internet and Twitter and all that sort of stuff was...
Well, there was no Twitter.
There was no Twitter, and the internet was in its infancy in terms of reach and that sort of thing. So there wasn't all this constant buzz. Mm-hmm. You read the newspaper, and then you thought, maybe I'll go to the movie. Right. So I went to it with a little bit more of an objective perspective, perhaps, than somebody who went 2 weeks later or even a month later. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was fine. I thought it was long.
Yeah.
My mule also fell asleep during the movie. But it was interesting enough, and it was, I don't know, because Titanic sunk off the coast of Newfoundland and there was a Canadian connection there, and I thought, well, maybe there'll be a Canadian guy, he'll show up and it'll have a different ending. Go around the iceberg, eh?
Oh, geez, get in the boat, eh? Oh, geez.
Would you just scoot over around the door there and we can all get on? So I didn't mind Titanic. I didn't. Of the 5 movies, and I will list them once again for people who might have not written them down.
Who maybe tuned out when we couldn't figure out what they were in the first 5 minutes.
Titanic, As Good as It Gets, The Full Monty, Good Will Hunting, L.A. Confidential. So L.A. Confidential we watched last night.
Which we had both seen before, but it finally was on Netflix, so we watched it
again.
And
you could say that was the impetus for this very podcast.
We had talked about doing it as a series, reviewing all the Best Picture nominees 10 or 5 or 20 years later and seeing how they hold up, and yeah.
And so we're in stage 2 of that project.
Yeah.
So L.A. Confidential, because we just watched it last night, I thought that was a very strong movie. I hadn't seen it in a long time. Mm-hmm. It's been 20 years now since it came out, and I probably have seen it 3 times in that amount of time. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was fantastic. I've seen Good Will Hunting many times. The Full Monty, I don't know why that's in there. It's an interesting movie, but...
That, to me, is like Four Weddings and a Funeral in the 95 Best Picture nominees. Like something fun and light and different, just to not have everything be so heavy and dour.
Yeah. And As Good as It Gets, I think, was fine. It was a good movie, but it was not... I don't know. I'm not a big Jack Nicholson fan, so that sort of put me off a little bit. And Helen Hunt and Jack Nicholson, I wasn't really buying them together in that movie. But of all of movies, Good Will Hunting to me had the largest impact on my life in terms of...
How so?
Well, I just liked it a lot because it was an interesting story. It was 2 guys who were growing up, and one guy was a genius and had a hidden talent, and the other guy was a bit of a mobster. And of course, I'm talking about Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. And that was the first project they did together, and it was very successful. So, and it was also filmed at my university. Part of it was filmed at my university.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. That's awesome.
Yes. So I like Good Will Hunting. Before I had seen L.A. Confidential, and it reminded me how great a movie that was. And Russell Crowe in his powerful, young, studly days.
He did look really young in that movie.
He looked good, and he was intimidating, and it sort of was very much a career-defining role for him because he played very similar parts in movies thereafter. I mean, he played an interesting character in A Beautiful Mind that was not like what he played in previous movies, but a lot of his movies are the tough guy that everybody fails to understand and has a hidden secret that is dirty and comes out at some point in the movie, like for example, the buddy movie that he did with Ryan Gosling.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
And which was fairly good, but it was again kind of formulaic. So there's where I stand. I think that Good Will Hunting, to me, in my personal life, had the most effect. I really liked Robin Williams in that movie. I like Matt Damon in that movie, actually.
So if you were voting, you would have given it to Good Will Hunting.
I would have given it to Good Will Hunting, but it's sort of like the album challenge thing we're doing on Facebook right now. It's more like influential movie to me.
Oh, okay.
And it opened up, it was two guys doing a buddy movie that didn't have to be a cop shoot 'em up lethal weapon type movie. It was two guys that had different pasts and different careers and that sort of thing. So what's your take, Coco?
Hands down, I would have given it to LA Confidential.
So where does LA Confidential fit in your pantheon of movies?
It is definitely in my top 10 of all time, if not my top 5, with
Wow.
like Jaws and the first two Godfather movies. I love that movie. I will watch that. We don't have cable.
We do have cable.
No, we have like
We have
ABC.
discount cable.
No,
I'll show you the cable bill.
We
do
don't have
cable.
But we don't have basic cable as in like TNT and stuff. And it used to come on TNT every now and then. I'd see it at like, midnight, and I would sit down and watch it every time. And every time I'm like, damn, that's a good movie.
Yeah.
Like, even in 97, 98, I said, LA Confidential deserves Best Picture. I know Titanic's going to get it because by the time the Oscars rolled around, everybody knew Titanic was going to get it. But, and like I said, I still would have probably given James Cameron Best Director, but Best Picture should have gone to LA Confidential. It's just so stunning on every level. The plot is complicated, but not super difficult to follow. Like, they explain it really well.
It is convoluted a little bit, but there are enough touch points along the way that I think that...
And all the acting performances are fantastic. Kim Basinger won supporting actress, and actually I think she was probably the weakest among the main cast. Like, Kevin Spacey, I hate to say this because we know what we know about him now, but...
He was great.
He was great. Yeah, Guy Pearce, Russell Crowe, fantastic. James Cromwell
was great.
Fantastic. Even Danny DeVito, like all the supporting cast. I mean, they were all so good.
It was really well done from top to bottom.
Yeah, and it's based on a James Ellroy book, which I have not read, but apparently it was pretty difficult to adapt because there were like 10 major plot lines in it, and they had to cut out pretty much everything except for what was, the 2 or 3 that were in the movie. So I loved it. It's fantastic.
Curtis Hanson was the director and was nominated for Best Director.
And he did win Best Adapted Screenplay.
Right.
So
there was that.
Yeah.
And it got nominated for cinematography, it got nominated for art direction, it got nominated for actress in a supporting role, which you said Kim Basinger won. And there was a lot of nominations for that movie. So it was very strong from top to bottom. Like I said, it was very well done, and the action was really cool. I didn't buy, not to spoil it too much,
20 years later.
20 years later, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, but I was not buying the ending. The ending was a little bit Hollywood for me. I won't get too specific about it, but...
And we don't know how closely it hews to the James Ellroy novel because we haven't read it.
Right.
So that could have been changed.
Right.
We're not aware.
It felt like the way the movie was, the climax happened and everything was coming down from there. And I was thinking, okay, we're going to have Guy Pearce walk out and it's going to be good. And then he walks out and then there's Russell Crowe sitting there after a serious shootout in which he probably should have died. And that ending felt tacked on to me. It felt like it was... The studio said, yeah, we need a happier ending. Because everybody gets killed, but we need a happier ending.
Right. There's no, moral... it's no happy ending. Even Guy Pearce is sort of morally ambiguous in the movie. So,
yeah.
It was smart, and and it's 2 hours and 17 minutes, I think Netflix said, but... It didn't feel 2 hours and 17 minutes, whereas Titanic is 3.5 hours, and your bum feels every minute of that 3.5 hours.
Well, how could you not feel a 3.5 hour movie? Really?
I'm just saying, there
had to be an intermission. Why wasn't there not an intermission?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm going to call up James Cameron because he's Canadian.
Yeah, you've got the inside track. You all know each other.
I think he's on my LinkedIn page.
Oh, yeah, along with that guy.
Roger Deakins.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have LinkedIn. I'd check that out.
Oh, okay, that's too bad.
Yeah. So, the clear winner for you was L.A. Confidential.
Yes, I like the full Monty. Clearly, it was never going to win. Like I said, it was 4 weddings and a funeral-esque. Just something light and fun and take the edge off. As good as it gets. I liked it. Whatever. I didn't like it as much as L.A. Confidential. And
you didn't like it as much as I disliked it.
True, yeah. And Good Will Hunting, I am the only person who has not seen it, and I now refuse to see it because Matt Damon has problems with women and minorities, and I will not support that BS. So, there you go. Screw you, Matt Damon.
And Ben Affleck has problems with making good cosmetic choices.
Ben Affleck just has problems with being self-destructive. And
so had some work done on his face, apparently. And did you see the tattoo that he got on his back?
Yeah, that he lied about getting. He said it was like a temporary thing for a movie, and now 2 years later, it's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah, why? Why you gotta lie about that, Ben Affleck? Like, what?
Because he figured that nobody was going to find out, I guess. Because nobody gossips in Hollywood.
Right, and it's not like he's ever shirtless in Hawaii on a beach, and paparazzi might take photos or something, So I will not see Good Will Hunting. So there you go.
While we're talking about questionable characters, L.A. Confidential raises the Kevin Spacey discussion that you mentioned earlier. Now, what does that do for you in terms of seeing him on screen? The Usual Suspects is probably in my top 5, if not my top. My top 5, if not my top 10.
That's a great movie.
Seven was a great movie. He was in that. What's in the box? What's in the box?
American Beauty.
So
he had a streak in the 90s where he was just on fire.
He was really good. He had some, and Glenn Ross, which was one of my favorite movies. Play. What is your take on watching people like this now, looking back?
Well, I hate to put it this way because it sort of seems like it's downplaying what he's accused of doing, but it's so disappointing. Like we said, he had that major streak of like 5 or 6 really, really fantastic movies in the 90s, and now
they're tainted.
They're tainted. I still enjoy L.A. Confidential, but he was so good in that, and all I could think was, oh, damn, Kevin Spacey.
What happened, man? Why'd you got to go do that?
Right, exactly. Like, this sucks. And with Woody Allen, I love Midnight in Paris, but, now I can't watch any Woody Allen movies anymore because of what he's accused of. So, and I understand that there are a lot of people who are accused of things or who have done things that we will never know of because that's the nature of that business. Things get hushed up and whatever, but it really sucks knowing that something that you like so much is, like you said, just tainted. What about you?
I'm of similar mindset, but I'm probably not as hard about it as you. Like I was disappointed, and obviously there are awful things that these people have done, and you can't excuse them. But at the same time, it just I feel more for the people around them that were in that movie, like Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce and Curtis Hanson, the director. Like they create this piece of work, and they're not endorsing anything that these people are doing. They're certainly not facilitating it or anything like that, or passing it along. But it's disappointing for those people, and so to me, it's more of the I would not turn it down because they are in it, but I'm not going to. I think the way to go about it now is the way that. So these people aren't going to be in movies going forward, or it'll be a lot more difficult for them to get movies made, etc., which is the way it should be now that we know that these things have happened. But yeah, it's a difficult spot because it's art, and there's so many skeevy people in
throughout
history, like painters and sculpturists and composers, musicians. I mean, we're looking at some musicians now feeling the heat for some of their behavior, whereas when you look at Led Zeppelin. And some of the stuff that they did, Jimmy Page was going out with a 14-year-old at one time. Right. And so in those days, that's just rock and roll. And people sort of see it that same way now, a little bit less enthusiastically than they did before. But it's still the same problem. It's still not good behavior.
Right. Well, and then if you want to talk about skeevy behavior, like Brad Pitt in the 90s was 26, and he was with Juliette Lewis, and she was 16. I mean... Where do we draw the line on Brad Pitt movies now too?
Right.
Am I not going to watch Thelma and Louise? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I hate to make this all about me because I am not a victim in any of this, but it's just I'm still going to watch LA Confidential and enjoy it, but every time Kevin Spacey is like, Rolo Tomasi, I'm going to be like, why, Kevin Spacey? Why?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's more or less where I am, too, is that you just get there and you watch the movie and then you're reminded of the person's personal life. You're able to check, for the most part, people's personal lives into the background when you're watching a movie. There are obvious cases like Tom Cruise or other people that are outsized personalities and have outsized personal lives, and you're sometimes unable, at least I am, to separate that from the act that they are doing, the acting that they are doing. But there are other times when it just becomes, oh yeah, right, I shouldn't, what am I doing watching this movie? He's terrible.
Right.
You know, it's not as obvious. So it's a difficult position to be put in.
Yeah. And then I feel bad. I'm like, well, now I'm boycotting Good Will Hunting because Matt Damon has problematic views on Me Too and on minorities, and he's not publicly been accused of actually doing the stuff that Kevin Spacey has been doing, which is clearly way worse. So
right. And where does the line get drawn?
Right.
On all this sort of stuff. And then I think of, Gus Van Sant, and I think of Robin Williams, and I think of some of the other people that were in that movie and put their every effort into it. So yeah, it's a difficult spot to be in.
Well, and then it also is difficult too because like with House of Cards, originally they were saying, well, maybe the entire House of Cards final season would just get scrapped because of Kevin Spacey. And now, great, now all those cast members and crew are out of jobs because one guy is a horrible alleged person.
Right.
And
that's what gets lost in this a lot of the time is seeing the cast. You see, 5% of the people that work on a movie or 10% of the people that work on a movie are actually on the screen. The rest of it, when you sit there in the movies, as we do, and watch the credits go up until the end, there are a lot of people involved in making a movie.
Right.
And so if you have somebody of questionable character in that movie and all of a sudden they're tainting the movie and people don't want to go see the movie, you're ignoring the work of all those people.
Right, like if the final season of House of Cards had been canceled, Robin Wright's going to be fine. She's got plenty of money.
Right.
But, the key grip who needs his paycheck to pay the mortgage and to put food on the table for his kids.
Right.
I mean, he's screwed. Like, he's got to scramble to find another job.
The gaffer.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's definitely an industry. Like, that's a friend of mine who is an actor. It's definitely something that it's a working person's industry. So you make a paycheck and you go paycheck to paycheck. It's not like people think of Hollywood and think of all this glamour and you're making money all over the place.
Right.
So for a lot of people, it's just a job, and it's something they go to, and then they come home and they say, well, what'd you do today? Well, I held the boom mic for 4 hours.
Right, totally.
And I got union scale. It was probably a pretty good wage, decent compared to what most people make, but compared to Hollywood, it's not a great amount of money. So these are the people that are more affected by these kinds of things than the everyday actor, the superstar actors.
Right. Like when the writer's strike happened, 10 years ago or whatever, and everything just completely shut down. There was no production on anything. I remember my mom got all mad and she's like, why is the news covering this? This is, BS. And I was like, the LA economy is losing millions of dollars a day because these people aren't getting paid. And therefore, they can't put gas in their car or buy food or go to the Gap and buy jeans for their kid, for their school uniform or whatever. This is a big economic deal. This isn't just Robert Downey Jr. wants another $10 million for playing Iron Man again. This is kind of a big deal for the economy out there.
Yeah.
And that's the, fifth biggest economy in the world, California? So yeah.
So I think now that we've come, we've fully extended this version of the podcast, this episode.
How did we end up starting with Best Picture nominees and talking about...
Because we're all about smart discussion here, Coco.
That's true.
On Coco and Adults.
Hashtag Smarty Pants.
Smarty Pants. Hashtag not wearing any pants.
Yeah.
So in summation, the 1998 Oscars for movies released in 1997.
Oh my God.
The winner was Titanic.
Yes.
And the other nominees were As Good as It Gets, The Full Monty, Good Will Hunting, L.A. Confidential. Coco selected
L.A. Confidential
as her favorite. I selected Good Will Hunting, but now that I've selected that and you said you're boycotting the movie, I think I'm going to change my mind so that you'll actually talk to me after the podcast is over.
I have to talk to you because we live together. So I don't have any choice.
You don't have to. I've seen it happen.
Well, that would be awkward.
That would be awkward. Speaking of awkward, we're going to wrap this episode up.
All right.
So thank you again for joining us for another week. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dolls.